Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. We are going to make a batch of cards today. We're going to use kind of a muted, subdued palette, and this is going to be great for your Father's Day crafting, for birthday cards, for graduation cards, or other congratulatory cards. And this muted color palette works for so many people. We're also using some supplies from the Dollar Tree. I found some beautiful sticker packs there. They were $1 a pack, and they had so many different designs. And once I took them out of the package, I realized they were really high quality and really felt like metal. So they're a wonderful option for embellishing your cards because they won't weigh them down like real metal embellishments will. We're going to start off by jelly printing our card bases. I love this because it saves a layer of pattern paper, and it's a way for you to get really creative with your jelly plate if you already have one. If not, you're going to see at the end of the video I actually use my kind of waste paper for making one of the cards, so just get creative with your inks and paints and have some fun. Now what I do is I put my jelly plate on a piece of plexiglass, and if I'm going to print right on my card bases, I kind of situate it about 1/4 inch from the edge, and I cut my card bases to be 5.5 by 7.5. So the plate is 1/4 of an inch away from the edge on my plexiglass piece there, and that way when I use my little positioning tool, which I have a video on how I made that using 2 L squares from the Dollar Tree, I can perfectly line up my jelly plate in the center of my card bases. And you can do that with whatever size jelly plate you have, and they come in all sorts of sizes, and if you can't find the size you need, you can always cut them down. I have a video on that too. And I know a lot of people were able to score really good deals on the big jelly plates recently at one of the big box stores, so I say if you can't use a 12 by 12 one, or maybe you bought a couple, why not cut the other one up to more useful sizes? I love doing card bases like this. Now here I'm putting a very affordable stencil down on my plate, and the nice thing about stenciling on the jelly plate is that the stencil actually kind of clings to that kind of tacky surface of the jelly plate. And I'm just using a tissue and some iridescent chalk pastels to sponge on some color. And now this is one of my favorite tricks for kind of keeping your list of supplies down while you're jelly printing. I use jelly gouache, and I mix it with a little bit of acrylic paint, and that way I can get whatever color I want. I just use white acrylic paint or glue. It doesn't have to be paint, and that way I can have all these colors at my fingertips. I just love it. And now you can see I have that jelly plate on its plexiglass pushed up into that corner, and I'm just pressing down my paper on top. So it's important when you do this technique, and I do have other videos showing this, that you layer everything up and then you put that paint down last, because that's going to pull up all the stamping. It's going to pull up all of the chalking. It's going to pull up all of that stuff. So it just is a little more versatile. You can also apply your stenciled chalk first and then do the stamping on top. It just depends on what you want to be the most prominent layer. I'm using I'm using Ranger Archival ink for this. You can also use StazOn, but my StazOn pad was dry, so I just went with the Archival and it worked just fine. And then once you get those layers down, brayer over your paint just like we did before and pull it off. Now my hands were dirty, and unfortunately I got ink on the back of that card base, so I'll either need to live with it or cover it with something. But there you can see how pretty it looks. Now this stamp set is, I'm pretty sure it's retired. I think I bought it for $10 at a stamp show from a Close to My Heart demonstrator. This stamp set is so fun because it's got a vintage typewriter, and then there's different little sentiments that you can stamp into the area where the paper is. But you're probably kind of freaking out like, oh no, I can't find that stamp set. Well, no, you don't need to, because there are lots of vintage typewriter stamps, cute typewriter stamps, and you probably have a bunch of sentiments already. And if you don't, well, you could go online and you can find clip art of a vintage typewriter. So you can be really creative, or just use whatever stamp you want to be for your focal point. It doesn't have to be a vintage typewriter. I just thought this would be a nice change of pace from the sentiments on banners that I've been doing so much lately. And I just like that this set had all those sentiments on it. So maybe you'll be able to score one on eBay or Etsy or something. So, take a look. So what I'm doing here is I'm making a mask. I could have stamped on the Post-it note, but I already cleaned my stamp, so I just laid my Post-it note down over it and traced around it with a pencil, and now I'm cutting it. Now I'm not being too fussy with my cutting, and you want to cut actually inside the lines a little bit, so that when we do our stamping and brayering techniques and inking techniques, that we don't have like a halo. Now my first thought with this background stamp here was to brayer on my ink so it'd be nice and smooth, but my ink pad was running a little dry. I actually had to re-ink the pad. I could notice just right there that it was not transferring enough ink, so I just went ahead and did the ink pad directly to the stamp. But sometimes if I have a really detailed stamp or I want a really smooth transition of color, I'll use my brayer to pick up the ink from my ink pad like that. And those are Kaleidocolor pads, and this is Royal Satin. That's the colorway that I'm using. I do believe you can still find those ink pads, although they're not as popular as they used to be. Sometimes you got to just go hunt around on like the big box stamping websites. Like I usually have good luck at Joann.com when I'm looking for ink pads like that, and they often run sales. And then to put a little more color on there and not to waste that juicy ink on the brayer, well, it wasn't that juicy, that's the problem. I just brayered some over there just to give it a little more color, and look at that. I think that is so pretty. And of course you can add more ink to the edges if you want to. Have a good time with it. Now I did have a little bit of halo, so I ended up cutting my mask smaller. So what I did was I took my water-based blending marker and I just kind of pushed the ink in where it needed to go so I wouldn't have a gap. So that's a great way to fix any of those halo spots that you might get after you mask if you're trying to ink up the background. And don't worry, it's not going to be that watermarky bold when it dries. I bought a neat little die set. It was designed by Tim Holtz by Sizzix, I believe, and it just had the coolest little like pocket. It almost looked like a locker door, little pocket here, and I'm just gluing that down to a piece of cream cardstock, and it also came with all these little tabs and clips that you could die cut out of pattern paper. The paper that I'm die cutting out of is actually the scraps left over from the envelopes I'm going to show you how to make at the end of the video. So my tip is to use the scraps left over from your envelopes if you like to hand make envelopes to embellish your cards, and you'll have a perfect match. So there's a tip. I'm also using some vintage postage stamps to embellish my cards. I bought a bunch from Sky Blue Pink at one point, but you can also buy actual like old stamps that have been like postmarked from stamp companies. Like I think Mystic Stamp was one that I've purchased from before, but you can buy just like they're not valuable. They're just they sell big bags of them pretty cheap. They're perfect for making collages, and if I can find any of them, I'll link them up below. You can also get stickers that look like faux postage. So anything like that is going to really embellish your card well. Or just start saving stamps when you get letters in the mail, and then eventually they'll be vintage. It's kind of a long-term project though. You got to have the end game, the long game in mind. I also had some die cuts in my collage drawer that I mined for this card. I wasn't so sure on that one, but the nice thing about that little die cut with all those little slots is that you don't have to decide whether you want it or not. Hey, remember those tickets from our trinket ticket video? So I have a video on how to make those tickets. Well, come to find out that this little stamp that I have here, it's by Tim Holtz. It's one of the Stampers Anonymous, I believe. It fits the one of the tags that I made perfectly. So such a lucky break, and I just stamped them in black ink and heat embossed them, and I think they just look fantastic. Now I do recommend stamping and heat embossing because you can see there's some color and pattern and texture and shimmer on those tags from our past video when we made them, that having the black embossing really makes it stand out and really makes it look good. And I just love how it kind of looks like an old ticket that's maybe been, had some coffee spilled on it or something. Now these are those stickers I was telling you about. They really do look and feel like metal in person, even though they are lightweight. They might actually be like a foil, like a painted foil. I'm not sure, but they feel great when you're taking them off the backing paper. They definitely don't feel like something I paid $1 for. I decided to use the photo corners on this one, and I just think that finishes it off so well. And I love how all the elements seem to go together because we made it ourselves. Now that little tag there, I actually gel printed that with the leftover from my little palette jelly plate that I was using for a palette at the beginning of the video. I just like slapped that tag down on it and let it dry, and when I pulled it up, it pulled up all that yummy, grungy paint that was left over from the two colors that we used for the backgrounds. So I'm adhering that on, and that twine that I used is actually some of the Dollar Tree Baker's twine. They have striped ones and some solids. I grabbed a few spools of the stripes, but I also grabbed this craft solid because I thought it was just really pretty and versatile, and works out great on these cards. I'm adding another one of these tickets here, and I'm not sure if the eye chart stamp is from the same set as that ticket, but I have a binder, and I know they're all Tim Holtz stamps because they're on those smaller storage sheets that fit in the mini binders, but I had quite a few of them from over the years, but I always forget to use them because they're in that funny little binder. I thought I'd just, grab it out and play with it today. And now I'm using some more of those little elements from one of the Dollar Tree sticker packs. I'm not sure, you gotta if you have a few Dollar Trees in your area, it doesn't hurt to pop in all of them from time to time and see what they have, because one thing I've noticed is that we've got 4 in our area and they don't always carry the same thing. I also recommend clustering and kind of staggering your embellishments at different levels, overlapping things. It gives a cohesiveness and makes it look really nice. I thought these stickers would be really great for Father's Day cards, and since we have so many male birthdays this time of year, I thought it would be a great design that would be very, very versatile. And another tip that I have is I cut down all my paper scraps to either 3x4 panels, which is, I think it's actually a Project Life size, but I don't do Project Life, and also 4 by 5 1/4. So I have card bases and like insert panels, matting panels all ready to go. I just keep them in bins in my card making cart rather than a bunch of random scraps. So that might be something that helps you. It looks nice and neat and tidy, and I find that if things are organized and easy to find, you're more likely to use them. Now I'm using some brown ink and a ink blending brush to ink up this little label. I thought it was perfect for a Father's Day card. I have no idea where it came from. It's some sort of collage pack, I'm sure. You used to be able to buy collage packs back, I would say early 2000s, late 90s, because doing kind of mixed media collage stamping was so popular, but I haven't seen collage packs lately. I'm sure they exist. I know I have some paper doll ones from Tim Holtz, but they used to have a lot more of that stuff, like back in the early 2000s. I wish they'd bring that stuff back, because it's nice to have a variety of different options like that. But luckily I do, because I hold on to things for a long time. And we're again going with the postage stamps, going with some of those metallic stickers from the Dollar Tree sticker pack, and we're finishing off this card. I really think the gel printing in the background is probably the most unifying thing here. If you don't want to gel print, you could find some pattern paper that would kind of go with your other stamping. Find the pattern paper first and then do your stamping though, because it's a lot easier to match your stamping and your coloring to pattern paper than it is to do all that coloring and stamping and then try to find pattern paper to match. So there's a quick tip for you. I think it's nice to wrap this twine around different elements. I like wrapping it around the pockets like that, or even around the whole card itself, because it adds a little bit of texture, like a physical texture. It also adds a little rusticness. It's an embellishment, but it's not overly foo-foo, so it looks really good with all sorts of cards. You could go with different colors, maybe a striped string, or even a novelty yarn if you're making this with like maybe a floral element or with lighter, brighter colors. So just dig through that stash and see what you have. I tried to integrate some skeleton leaves in there. I can't remember if I left it or took it away afterwards, but I think that when you're pulling elements for a card, look through stuff that matches, things that the colors are harmonious with, things that you think the textures and the themes would work, and then bring it all to your table. And then when you're working, grab from here, grab from there, you're going to come up with the most original cards, because it's not going to look like anybody else's, especially if you've been crafting for a long time. You're going to have so many different embellishments that somebody that say started crafting this year wouldn't have, just because different products are released all the time. So there's a little benefit, I think, to having an older stash. I don't think everybody's cards should look exactly the same. There's nothing wrong with buying the exact products for a project you want to do from being inspired by an example on a stamps company's website. There's nothing at all wrong with that, especially when you're a beginner and you might not really have an idea of what your personal style is, but also don't feel like you have to live up to anybody else's standards when you're making cards, because you know what, when the person that opens their card in the mail, they're just going to be so happy that they got a card and that you took the time to make it. They're not following all of the stamping websites, and they're not following all of the stamping videos, so anything you show them is going to be new to them. Now, I had this scrap paper. It was actually I had cleaned off my gel plate by printing on a bent card that I had that I really couldn't use again, and it kept picking up all these layers of ink, and I actually thought it looked kind of cool, so I thought, why not use that for one more card? I had one more focal image. I always do an extra one because I usually mess one up, but for whatever luck, I didn't mess it up. So I'm like, well, I'm going to see if I can use this leftover my waste paper, basically my just like kind of under paper, throwaway paper, as a backing. And since only a little bit's showing, I think it looks great. It's got some texture. It's got all the colors we've been using for this project, and especially since I'm layering up some of the scraps from my envelope that I had left, it's going to match perfectly. I thought these hinges were kind of cute. I did have to fuss around a little bit to figure out what hinges I wanted, where I wanted them. I don't know why that was so hard. I finally went with these shorter ones because they worked a little bit better. Sorry for my head being in the way there. At least I brushed my hair. I hope I did anyway. But I think it's simple and it's cute, and this is basically a bonus card because I didn't have to do anything else. Now here again, I'm going to show you my trick for making envelopes because I think on my last video I showed you on a square card and some people didn't understand how to do it. So you measure your card corner to corner and add 1 inch. So that was 9 1/4 from corner to corner. So I cut my paper to 10 1/4 square. Okay, this is always going to work no matter what size card you have. Measure corner to corner if it's a square or a rectangle and add 1 inch. Cut it into a square of that size. Then you're going to fold the corners around the card. So see how you set the card on straight and you have the paper like a diamond? You fold those corners around and it's going to make the perfect size card. Now if you have a lot of embellishments on there, you can actually shift the card over a little bit before you fold it to give it a little bit extra space. But if it's a flat card, these are reasonably flat, doing it just like this is fine. So basically you, instead of folding it right up against the card, you scoot your card out a little bit so you make a little more room. I hope that makes sense. But there you can see I only cut out the corners on the top because I'm lazy and you don't need to on the bottom. And I haven't had an issue with any of these cards getting ripped in the mail or anything. And another tip, you might want to actually make the card with the pattern paper on the inside because it'll be easier to write an address on it and then it will look like a lined envelope. But most of these cards I'll be hand delivering, so I'm going with the paper on the outside because I think that's a really pretty look. You can also use a white address label to address your envelope if you're on a really dark pattern paper. So it works really, really well, and I think it looks fantastic. And you can see I've made envelopes for each of the cards, and because I knew I was going to make envelopes, I cut down the paper first and I used that paper to do all my embellishing and to do all of my, like any of the die cut pieces of paper. Oh, there you can see a card that I did with butterfly die cuts just to change it up a little bit, make it a little more softer and organic. Oops, that one's upside down. There you can see the die cut papers in the background. And I will go by whatever die cut paper I used and match the envelope if I use that one in that card. But they all go really well together, so I don't need to be too particular when I'm using the envelopes. And that one was my bonus card, so I just used a store-bought envelope. Hope you enjoyed this. If so, please give me a thumbs up before you go. Until next time, happy crafting.